You know, I have a pair of cowboy boots.
Yeah.
And I bought them when I was in Austin one time, of course, and they were like super fancy ones, and I never wear them.
Oh, no?
I feel like such a nerd when I wear them because mine are like have like little hearts.
Nice. I actually got these here, so
yeah.
I guess, but it's still the
them
West.
I should bring them into the foot.
Yeah, you should. Oh, yeah. And I like to wear it with like dresses because it's a little, it's my personality. I don't like to be super feminine or super masculine. It's kind of a nice mix. So yeah, it's always a conversation starter, like everywhere I go.
I've had like shoes just completely go AWOL on me.
Oh,
like
yeah?
that, where I've owned them for years, and then all of a sudden they're like, you know what? I know we were super comfortable and everything was cool. Fuck you. Now you get blisters like every second that you wear them. And I like don't understand it because it's not like my feet grew.
Maybe you should take them back to the cobbler?
Maybe. I don't have like my cobbler.
Okay.
I'm like, my husband works at Facebook, so I send all my shoes to get fixed like with him because I'm like, I haven't formed a shoe relationship yet in the city.
Nice.
But.
Welcome to the 17th episode of FemgineerTV, brought to you by Pivotal Tracker. I'm your host, Poornima Vijayashanker, the founder of Femgineer. In this show, I invite innovators in tech, and together we debunk myths and misconceptions related to building products and companies in tech. At some point in your careers, you might be tempted to leave the comforts of your company and strike out on your own. But there's that moment of hesitation where you might worry if you're good enough, if people will actually want to be your clients, and how do you put it all together? Well, in today's episode, we're going to be talking with Jessica Hische, who is a freelance designer who focuses on lettering, illustration, and type design. Now, Jessica has gone from working in a studio and transitioned to being a freelancer, so she's going to share a lot of her journey with all of you today. Thanks for joining us, Jessica.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. So I think I discovered your work while I was doing a Google search on pricing and getting paid, and I stumbled across your post on the dark art of pricing.
Indeed.
And loved it, and we're going to get into that in a little bit, but ever since then I've been quietly admiring your work, so I'm really excited to be here, and it's a treat for me to be talking to you. Now, I know you've worked with a lot of prominent clients and you do a lot of different work, but let's go way back to the beginning, right? What did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, I always wanted to be an artist, and I don't really know what that meant. You know, like I was a kid that just loved to draw all day, and I think part of the reason why I love to draw all day is because I was easily given permission to do so, because it is a quiet activity that keeps children occupied for many hours of the day. So my parents were like, yes, please continue on down this path of being quiet in the corner and doing the artwork that you seem so in love with. But it wasn't until I got to college that I really figured out how to turn that into a career. And it was really not purposeful. Like, I didn't go to college intending to become a designer because there are careers in design. I went to art school trying to pursue literally anything that had to do with art. I took sculpture classes, glass blowing classes, painting classes, and I really loved everything. But when I took my first design class is when I really felt like I sort of found the path that I wanted to follow, just because it took a lot of the things that held me up a lot about just general art making and removed them so that the path became a lot easier. So for me, I mean, being an 18, 19-year-old in college, I didn't feel like I could trust whatever opinions that I had to like express in the world as being valid. I was like, my life has been generally pretty normal. I don't come from a crazy background. I don't have like an incredibly unique opinion to share with the world yet. And being able to work for clients, you know, and in school it's not for clients, it's like based on project briefs, was really freeing because it took down the wall of like starting a project. And so that's, I think, why I ended up in design and why I've stuck with it and why I enjoy it so much, because I really like how collaborative it is and how it's about problem solving instead of about self-expression.
Yeah. And why specifically lettering?
Well, lettering, I did a bit of it in college just because my school was really hands-on and encouraged a lot of exploration and you know, bringing stuff from other disciplines into your work. And I was like every other student that was super broke and couldn't afford to buy fonts. And so I drew my own fonts for projects a lot and didn't realize that that was actually a profession unto itself. Actually, not until a few years after college. Because when I was working for Louise Feely after I graduated, she does a ton of lettering for her projects, and the people that work for her do a lot of lettering for the projects. But even then, I always thought of it as I'm a designer that draws lettering as a part of my work, not thinking that that was a field unto itself. And so I was doing a lot of illustration work on the side because I love illustration. And I actually feel like if I understood the field of illustration more when I was younger, I probably would have ended up an illustrator rather than a designer, because that's really like drawing all day with a purpose for clients is it, you know?
Yeah.
But I love that I have the design background because lettering is a really good marriage of the two. You know, you use principles from typographic design, but you're drawing it custom as an illustrator would work. So the whole process of working with clients and even just the process of creation is very similar to being an illustrator. It's just you sort of sit on this line between design and illustration.
So you mentioned the opportunity that you got to work with Louise Feely, and that's great. And for those of you out there who aren't familiar, Louise has done a lot of design work for prominent brands like Good Housekeeping and Tiffany and Company. And so for our viewers out there who might just be graduating and thinking, wow, what a lucky break, Jessica. How do I get such a lucky break, right? I realized it wasn't a lucky break. You actually did something to get that opportunity. Do you mind sharing the story of how you got it?
You know, it feels a little bit like a lucky break because but this is what I tell students all the time when they reach out to me about how do you reach out to people that you want to work for, blah, blah, blah. Because people can get really discouraged if they're reaching out to people and then they get a lot of, sorry, we're not hiring, sorry, we're not hiring. So what I always tell students and young designers is that if you're interested in working somewhere, meet with them without immediately saying, I really want you to hire me. Because as people that are in any professional field for a while know, if people really want you to work somewhere, they will make room for you.
Right.
But you have to get in the door and get them to meet you first. And really, like, in your super early career, the thing that's going to get you a job is your attitude and your professionalism and just like seeming like someone that would be a good addition to a team rather than your work. Because it's clear that your work is early. You know, there's still a lot of room to grow.
Oh, yeah.
But if you have a bad attitude, your potential employer would automatically know, like, well, I don't know how much this person's going to grow under my tutelage.
Right.
So when I ended up working for Louise, I wasn't actually looking to work for her. I sent her one of my illustration promos just because I was such a super fan of hers.
Right.
And I sent it out to 250 people, like, that were all in ad agencies and publishing houses trying to get freelance work. And I got hardly any responses whatsoever, except from Louise, who wrote me because I happened to send this promo to her while she was in this period looking for a new designer.
Oh, great.
And so she had not publicly advertised this position because a lot of small studios don't do that. What they do first is try to exhaust their network of people that they know or recommendations of people that they know. And she had sort of worked through a lot of that, but was open to the opportunity of meeting new people. And I had sent the promo along right at that time. So she called me in for an interview. I was not 100% ready to upend my life and move to a new city.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was completely happy living in Philadelphia and thought that I was going to be a freelance illustrator in Philadelphia. And so it was scary to take the leap, but of course I had to do it because I was, you know, I idolized her at the time too. But it was an opportunity that felt like it came out of nowhere, but it's not that it did. It's that I worked so hard when I was in college to try to like make this portfolio that stood out from a lot of people. And then I was open to new opportunities and putting myself out there to people that, you know, didn't need to be looking at my work, but I wanted to put my work in front of them.
Yeah. And how do you think she influenced you, or how do you think she inspired you?
In so many different ways. I mean, one of the biggest influences that I think Louise had on me is just how to run a business that isn't a high-stress environment. Because the job that I worked before working for her was a great studio in Philadelphia called Headcase Design, but it was run much more like how a freelancer would run their studio, where it's just like, oh, project time, we're working on stuff whenever. This is a crazy book project. I guess we're working until midnight tonight. You know, so the schedules were a little hairier. But with Louise, she was just super tight with clients. she would not schedule a meeting to show a presentation until after all the printouts were made. So it sort of showed me that if you're prepared and you take control of your calendar and your schedule, and not in a way that is abrasive to other people, but just in a way that, sets up yourself for success, that you can both be successful and not work 24 hours a day.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So while you were working for Louise, you weren't just working for Louise, you were also doing some freelancing, right?
Yeah, so before working for Louise, I had sent out that promo and was really pursuing this freelance illustration work, and some of it started to trickle in. So when I started working for Louise, I asked her, I know that you have a non-compete and I won't do anything to work for your clients or pull clients away from you, but I do really want to do this freelance illustration on the side. And she was very understanding and said, if someone comes to you and it's clear that they're coming to you and not coming to you because they want a cheaper me, then you're welcome to do it.
Right.
And, when you work for someone that's been in the industry for 20 years, not working for any of their clients can be really hard.
Right.
Because she's worked with every publisher and worked with every magazine, but we had a really good, honest and open relationship about that. And she said, as long as this doesn't interfere with the work that you're doing for me and that it doesn't take away from the work that could have been coming to my studio, I'm completely fine with it. So I was just really open with her about it. So and the thing that made it very easy for me to do freelance illustration work on the side, there were a couple of things. I think it's easier to do work after work if it's really different from the work that you're doing during the day.
Yes.
So if you're doing like insane engineering work during the day, you don't go home at night and do more insane engineering work because you burn out. Because it feels like one 16-hour workday rather than a 9-hour workday and a 7-hour workday. So the illustration work was different enough from my design work that I felt like I was just going to a second job that was still really interesting when I was working at night. And then the other thing that really helped it is the fact that Louise did run such a tight ship with the studio, so that I was out of there every day by 6 p.m. So I could be really honest with my freelance clients and say, hey, I can't do anything right now, but I'm going to be home in an hour and I can send you the file then. And if I was working in a different studio where the hours were more unpredictable, I think it would have been a lot harder to run the freelance work on the side.
Right. So there weren't those firefighting moments where you had to freak out and be like, oh, my boss, I got to go answer her stuff. I can't handle you.
There still were firefighting moments, but not because of Louise, because of clients that couldn't, sometimes you work with a client and they're like, but we need this at 2 p.m. And I'm like, you didn't tell me that yesterday.
Right.
You told me that you needed it by end of day, and the end of day is not 2 p.m.
2 p.m. some other time zone.
Some other time zone. I'm like, you're not in Europe, you're in California. 2 p.m. is not end of your day. Yeah. I was living in New York at the time.
So it sounds like you had a good thing with Louise. Why leave the comforts of a company and strike out on your own?
Well, the schedule was really difficult to keep up with. So I started working for Louise when I was 23. And I worked for her for 2.5 years and kept up this schedule, which was pretty much me working from 9 in the morning until 1 in the morning, like most days.
Right.
And then working at least one day over the weekend. And the thing that I always knew that I wanted to be on my own, just because I really liked having the autonomy to just take on the projects that you want to take on. And of course, I was like a young designer too that wanted the like ownership over their work. I think that that's one of the reasons why a lot of people really look towards freelance work as being the ideal, is because when they're young, they just want to get the credit for what they're working on. And I think now in retrospect, I can completely like understand why someone would think that being freelance is like the ultimate thing to do, when really if you have dreams of doing really big work or really like grandiose projects, it's not, because it's too difficult to do everything yourself or to coordinate, lots of outside help. So being at a company can be amazing. But for me, it was really practical. Like it's different to work at a small design studio in New York that's, focused on smaller niche clients like restaurants and food packaging and things like that. My salary was not like a Silicon Valley salary, And so at a certain point, my freelance work, I was earning more in my hours as a freelancer than I was in my hours working for Louise.
Okay.
And I could have been saying, awesome, like that's just double salary.
Right.
But I really wanted to reclaim a little bit of my personal time back. Okay. And it just was a clear indicator of like, hey, this is really, the ball is rolling and I can roll with it. And now is the time to do it and feel safe about it.
Yeah. So that's a great transition where you had been working and moonlighting and then decided, okay, the freelance gigs are actually coming through and I have a sustainable business. Now I'm going to leave my full-time position versus many of us who wake up one day and we're like, I hate working here. I want to quit. Oh, wait, I have no money in the bank.
Yeah.
How am I going to make this happen?
I think that one of the things that's really important as a creative person or just anyone in general is to be really self-aware and staying in check with yourself and your emotions about the work that you're doing and doing what you can to maneuver your environment to make sure it's ideal for you. Like, I'm not the kind of person that says that everyone needs to quit their day job and do what they love. I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
Because I think that day jobs can be amazing. And like, if you give up on them too quickly, you're not exploring all the ways that you could like be in that very nurturing environment, but optimize it for you. But to make like a really weird comparison, I had a baby last year, and in the process of literally having the baby, they said, if you think that you're going to need an epidural, you can't tell us when you're past the point of no return. You have to tell us when you're like 80% of the way. So just because they might be in another surgery or whatever, and you need to make sure they're around. And I think that it can be like that with your career, where you can't wait until you're broken to fix everything. You have to be staying in check and staying on top of it. And when you start feeling like things are not going the way they're supposed to be, that's when you need to be exploring other options. Because if you've already made it to the desperation point, that's when you're going to make really rash decisions. And when you're going to do things like quit your job with no other options out there.
Or no source of income. And then you're like, oh no, what am I going to do next?
Yeah. And I think a lot of people that haven't been able to pursue freelance careers well, it's because they've made it too far into their job to the, I hate my job, I need to completely change my life point. And then they branch out on their own, and it can take a while to kickstart a freelance career. And even as someone with a successful career, what I remind people all the time is it's not a steady paycheck. So clients usually have contractually up to 90 days to pay you, and really they can kind of take longer than that before you start sending aggressive emails to them. So the work that you're doing right now is not paying your bills right now. It's paying your bills 3 to 6 months from now. So that can be really scary if you go out on your own, have no other options, have no money saved, knowing that even if you are insanely successful and have 10 projects lined up right when you're done, you're not going to get paid for those projects for a few months. And I think that that's something to really keep in mind. And that's why you do have to be aware of like, holy shit, I'm burning out. I need to figure out my next step, and I need to start setting myself up so that next step can not be super scary and can be actually doable.
Yeah. So let's talk about how you came up with that pipeline of clients when you were transitioning. Did you have people that you had established relationships with, or did you write a bunch of blog posts? How did that come about?
Well, for me, as an illustrator, it's a little bit different than being a freelance designer or being a freelance anybody that has long-term relationships with people, right? So I love illustration because the project timelines are generally a lot shorter, and I get a lot of high turnover, and I get to work on a lot of different kinds of projects. But what I don't get a lot usually is a ton of repeat clients, because when clients hire me, they want me to do my specific thing for a specific project, but the next project they might want a completely different look. So it kind of is about quantity and just making sure that you're staying involved in the conversation and, being involved in the communities and, whether that's online or in person, just making sure that you're establishing these relationships with art directors, with designers, with other illustrators, because work comes from word of mouth a lot of times. I was also super involved just in the community online, trying to post resources, and I started doing public speaking after I had put out a personal project that people were interested in hearing the background of, and that certainly brought in a lot of work. But I think for most people, the thing that brings in the most work is just the relationships that you have with people. And that's why it's important too that if you are planning to leave your job, that you don't burn a ton of bridges. Because a lot of times work can come that way. I mean, how many companies in the Bay Area do you know that hire people that have left the company as freelancers? It's like a very often thing.
It's usually your first client sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that it's really important to think about that and to just know that like any relationship that you're building, even if it doesn't seem like it's a direct correlated relationship for like this person will literally give me a project, it could turn into something. And with peers too, it really works that way. If you think about how much work runoff people have, because if they're like me and a freelancer that doesn't plan to have a 10-person studio, there's only so much work that I could take on. And then the work that I can't take on, clients very much appreciate if I can refer them to someone that would be a good match for the project. And so everybody has their like 5 to 10 people that they'll send their runoff work to, and you can start making those relationships while you still have a job.
Yeah, so why not the 10-person studio? Why stay by yourself?
For me, I still really like having the flexibility of being able to dictate my schedule. Like for now, especially I have a 1-year-old daughter, and we're sort of in the time of our lives where the flexibility of my career makes a huge difference for us being able to like parent equally and like if I had a full-time studio and suddenly had to take 3 days off work because my nanny called in sick or something and didn't have employees that I could trust 100% to be autonomous while I was gone, I think it would be really stressful. I also just really, I still really like being able to like work when the spirit moves me, which of course I keep a really tight schedule, especially because of childcare and things like that. But I like that if I have to work on a Saturday because of a Monday deadline, then I can take off on a Wednesday. And if I was running my own studio, I wouldn't really have that. I'd have to be the person running a tighter ship.
Right. You have to be more regimented.
I'd have to
routine.
Be more regimented and routine. And also too, I mean, any person that has been running their own studio or freelancing can tell you that a lot of the work that you do is not actually creating the work. It's about managing your business. And I think that if I were to start setting up a studio, the first move that most people do is to hire junior designers or people that can help make the work, when really that's the opposite of what I want. What I don't want to do is hire other people to do the thing that I want to be doing so that I can do more managing. Like I think there could be a time in my life where I'm interested in doing more art direction and management. And I love teaching and I love mentoring and that kind of thing. So I do foresee that at some point in my life I could want to run a studio, but right now what I really want is just more time to actually like physically make stuff, and the more people I have working for me, the less time I will have for that.
So in a previous episode with Maria Molfino, we talked about creative freedom, and it's clear that you are practicing creative freedom. But has there ever been a time in your career where the criticism from a client or a peer or maybe even a mentor stung?
Absolutely. I mean, there's always going to be not haters, because they're not haters. They're people with legitimate criticisms for you. And I think that you have to engage with people, especially if they have something that you feel is like legitimate criticism or something that's way off base too. I've had a couple of instances with people online where they said something like really intense about me, but still like at replying me. And I've reached out to them and be like, hey, I'm sorry that you feel that way. Like, what's the deal? Like, can we talk about it? And I think people are so used to behaving on, like anonymously and not realizing that there's people behind the people that they talk about. And when they are confronted by it, they're like, oh, actually, I was just talking out of my ass. I didn't mean it or whatever. But sometimes you do get legitimate criticism. And the things to sort of ask yourself are like, what's this person's intentions with giving me this criticism? Like, are they projecting?
Yes.
Because that can definitely happen. Or is this something that is an actual thing? Is this a more than one-time occurrence? Like, have I gotten similar feedback from other people? I think the first time that you get really hard criticism about something, you can take it with a grain of salt. Pay attention to it, but know that this could just be a subjective thing.
They're blowing off steam. They're having a bad day.
And if you know that you have done that thing and they're alerting you to it, that's a different thing.
Right.
But if you start getting feedback that's similar over and over again, then clearly there is something that you need to address. So one of the things the feedback that I got from actually like close friends early on was like, whoa, Jessica, watch how much you celebrate these things that you're working on, because maybe you'll come off as being like full of yourself. And I had to sort of look at that and go, well, what kind of person like, what kind of person is saying this to me? Oh, this person is a much more private person that doesn't feel like it's appropriate to say, oh, I'm so excited about this. Look at this thing I did. You know? And then if it depends, like if someone that it's just not what they would do says that versus it's someone that would do that and they're saying that, you know, then you can actually take that. And so, okay, maybe I was being a little braggy.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's why you sort of put the disclaimer of I'm a constant oversharer.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that feedback early on influenced the kind of writing that I do on my site, where I always try to make everything from my experience because I feel like it's difficult to refute someone's advice if they're just speaking clearly about things that they have gone through or things that have worked for them or have not worked for them versus writing about empirical, like, this is the way to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that, of course, like, there are people out there that love writing that way and, like, want to write, like, the resource. But I think because I've been a little self-conscious about expertise in general, just like, you know, I'm 32, but I feel like I'm still like a baby when it comes to like having a career. Like, I don't want people that are 70 that have been doing this for this long to go, oh, honey, like,
let me tell you. Yeah.
Let me tell you what it's like after you've been doing it for 40 years.
Right.
You know, so I think always approaching, you know, feedback and advice and things like that from my own personal perspective has helped me to share more because I feel less intimidated about the fact that whatever I'm sharing will be incorrect because it's correct to how I was feeling at that time. And even with articles that I've posted to my site and things like that, if they're viewed 6 years later, I can at least say, well, that's what it was like for me 6 years ago. That's not my opinion now, but that's what it was 6 years ago.
Nice. Now, you've also worked with some prominent clients like Wes Anderson and Dave Eggers. Were you ever concerned that you couldn't live up to what their vision was for their brand or their book or movie?
I mean, both of those clients have very specific visions.
Okay.
So one of the things that I think has worked in my relationship with the both of them, like, I've worked with Dave like 3 or 4 times now, and I just really like working with him. And Wes was amazing to work with on the Moonrise Kingdom titles, but you have to really give yourself over to whatever it is that their vision is. And I think that designers can have a difficult time knowing when to step in and say, like, you should be trusting me to do this.
Right.
Versus when you tear down that wall and say, I'm your hands, tell me what you need my hands to do.
Okay.
You know, so I think because I trust both of them, like, so implicitly with whatever vision that they have in their heads, it's easy for me to go, okay, you don't like that R, let me change that R. Versus, I don't know, I mean, do we really need to talk about this R? Like, I don't want to have an argument with them if they have a really clear idea of what they want. What I'm always happy to push back on is when I get feedback that disagrees with how something should be drawn because of just the anatomy of type and that kind of thing. And I always am just very straightforward, and I say, you know, technically we could do anything. You know, like, you want me to make that R look like a unicorn? Like, I can absolutely do that. But is it the correct way that letter should be constructed? No. Like, based on the rest of these letter forms, it no longer matches the rest of this. Like, and ultimately, if I have to, like, really get people to back off, I'm like, nerds love writing really angry articles about these things. And, like, but I'm not going to say that they're definitely going to, but there's the possibility that some Fast Company article or some brand new article or whatever is going to premiere with a major criticism of this thing that is screwed up. And what I don't want to do is set you up for that to definitely happen.
Oh, nice. So you basically walk them through the consequences of their choice or their vision.
Exactly.
That's smart. I've never thought about it that way. That's a good idea.
Well, and I think, too, I am really happy opening clients up to the process of doing what I do and trying to educate them about, like, why decisions are made. And I think that it helps them, but it also helps me because it makes me be really, you know, I have to be very decisive about the things that I do because I know that they have to be backed up all the time. Like, I don't just make decisions because I feel like it. I make decisions because there's a reason.
Yeah.
And especially when it comes to doing logo type work and that kind of thing, because I want them to be able to ask me about any single part of that letter form and for me to give them a reason, like an actual reason of why it was drawn the way that it was, so that they can then say that to someone else or know that, everything was thought through.
So aside from these consequences they might face, has there ever been a time where someone has come to you and had a vision that didn't align with your own integrity?
Integrity stuff usually comes up much earlier on. Like if someone is trying to come to me and have me work on a project for a client who I don't agree with, like tobacco companies would be a big one, something like that. You just have to make decisions of, I don't work for tobacco companies,
right.
And you can give legitimate reasons of why you don't. Like I could say, I don't want to work for tobacco companies because I want to also work on children's projects and I feel like there's a major conflict of interest in working for those two different kinds of clients. Or you could just not give a real reason and just say, sorry, I don't work for this. I don't do work for churches.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
Because I'm not a religious person myself. And I feel like there are certain industries where if you end up becoming a person that works for them, there are assumptions made about the kind of person that you are.
Yeah.
And not that religion is a bad thing all the time, but I don't want people to make those automatic assumptions of me. So it hardly ever comes up where there's an integrity issue later in a project. It's usually when people are initially hiring you.
So I know another challenge that a lot of designers and engineers who are freelancers struggle with is getting people to compensate them fairly for the work that they do. And it's a topic I feel strongly about. I've written a number of things on. And as I was doing my research, I stumbled across your post on the dark art of pricing. Can you share with us what your process is for pricing and how you convey that to your clients?
Sure. So one of the things that I think is really important that I think people learn over the course of their career is that having a contract and talking about pricing upfront is incredibly important, as uncomfortable as the process can be. And I think that one of the things that I have really learned is that while clients love being special, the thing that they don't love being special about is when it comes to pricing. They want to know that whatever you're telling them is just the fact. It's not a specific thing that you're coming up with them. You're giving them the price based on your own experience and what you would have told other people, which is odd. It's not odd. It makes total sense. In the same way, like you wouldn't want to go to a clothing store and have there be no labels on the clothes, and then you go up to the register and they go, $20, and then you're like, oh my God, was this $20 just for me or just is this for everybody? And I think that being really upfront and matter of fact about how you want to price things is really important. And I think it's important too to talk about it as this is what the value of the work is for me. And you can you can justify it as much as you want. Like when it comes to doing logo work, for instance, I can say, well, I only want to do one logo project at a time. It takes me 6 to 8 weeks minimally to work on a project. And because of that, I need to charge X. Like I could charge less if I was taking on more projects at a time, but then I couldn't devote as much of myself to the clients. Right. So if people come to you, it's nice to have those reasons of hey, the reason why this is because of this. But the other tactics are sort of, I don't price hourly. And part of that is because I don't want clients to just be able to nitpick forever and bleed into other client work, because my calendar can be really difficult to maneuver. So having everything priced per project really makes these clear deliverable dates and then lets me know when something is probably going to be off the books and then I can have a new project come on. Another reason why pricing hourly is really difficult for creatives is that people get extremely allergic to high hourly rates, even though as a professional, you're probably a lot more efficient than you were as a young designer, and therefore it takes you way less time. But you couldn't, say it took you 4 hours to make a poster, you couldn't charge someone, $400 an hour to make that poster because you wanted to make over $1,000 on the poster. They would look at you like you were crazy, which is odd because, lawyers easily charge that much, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
But people expect, there's this horrible double standard where if you love your work, you should be paid very little. Yeah. And part of that is just jealousy from other people where they're like, you're lucky enough that you're doing what you like to do, therefore you shouldn't be paid like how a lawyer is, because clearly they had to pay for tons of education and they don't actually like their job half the time, whatever.
Really, I thought that was just an insurance policy so they avoid getting sued. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So there's, it's just really figuring out what works for you and also just talking to people around you. If you're not competing directly with an individual on a project, you can have very open conversations about pricing. Like you can, if someone came to you and said, hey, I want you to design a website for me, you could write every person you've ever met and ask them like, hey, I'm going to be vague about the person because I don't want to give away the client name, but here's the general brief. What would you charge for this?
Okay.
And you can have those conversations super candidly, and I really encourage people to do it. And talk to a variety of people. Don't just talk to your one friend. Because your one friend might be undercharging.
Yeah, that's
or
true.
Your one friend might be overcharging a lot, because they have achieved some level of fame that you're not at or yet something. And so it's important to do that. The only time that you can't have those conversations is if you and a friend are competing for the same project. And that's called price fixing. So you can't talk about pricing with them until after you've both delivered your prices.
What about free?
Well, honestly, I don't work for free for real clients. I do work for free for charities. I do work for barter occasionally. Like, for instance, I get free haircuts forever from my hairdresser because I did some logo work for her. But it's really pretty transparent usually when someone's trying to get you to do work for free when they actually do have a budget versus when they're asking you to do something for free because they have $0 and want to bring you on as like an investor in their project or whatever. There should be some exchange of something, if that's the circumstance.
Even if you're young and just getting started. Because you really need to establish a way to, assign value to your work. And one of the ways that's really great for doing that, if you are clearly working with people with no budget, but you don't want to work for free, is to send them a contract outlining what you should be paid. Yes.
But then discounting it to what they're offering to pay.
Sure.
So then they know that you're giving them this like special one-time deal. And then also next time they come to you, they shouldn't expect that special one-time deal. And when they recommend you to friends, those friends shouldn't expect those one-time deal. Because that's the real danger in pricing yourself very cheaply, is that if most of the work that comes to you is based on referrals, because that's a lot of how work happens, you don't want to be known as the person that works for $20 an hour because everyone is going to say that. I mean, how many people have you met that when they talk about working with someone, they're like, oh my God, and he was so inexpensive. He was so
Nobody
reasonable.
Says that. Right.
It's the first thing that they say if it's a thing that they feel they can share.
Right.
But if they felt like they were getting a discount, they're not going to say, oh, he was so reasonable. They're going to say, oh, well, we had like a special thing worked out, and they won't say that that's available to everyone.
Exactly. I think that's also valuable for those of us who work for sweat equity, but that contract of, okay, for some period of time, but then once that funding or that first customer comes, it's time to be valued for the work that you've done.
Exactly. I mean, and that's something that I think is really unique with working with startups and something that people in the Bay Area experience a lot more than in other areas of the world where I think too, like before I moved here, if you think about working for someone for equity, you think, oh, awesome, like this could be a real payday. And then
except when everybody around is offering equity, right?
And then realize that like 95% of businesses fail. And then also of those 5%, it might take 6 or 7 years before you have the option to exercise those stock that you were granted. So if you never care about earning money and want to just roll the dice as a lottery ticket, it's a great thing to do. And if you have the bandwidth in your life to do that, it's absolutely a cool thing to do because you can every now and then it does actually work. And like you might get a few $1,000s or, whatever. But if you actually need to think about paying the bills, you need other ways to do it. One of the ways that I think designers and just people in general can do that is by taking a low fee and then having the additional payment be something that's a little bit more ethereal, like stock or something like that. And I do that when it comes to working on greeting cards and things like that. I'll get paid a very low fee up front and then get royalties later on the sales of the cards.
Nice.
So that the ultimate payment ends up being what it should be, but it just takes a bit to get there.
And you're more aligned as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So another one of my favorite talks is the one that you gave on learning tangential skills. Why is it important for designers or engineers to learn these tangential skills? Why not just focus and get better on your particular craft?
Well, I think it's important to stay involved in your direct industry for sure, especially when it comes to stuff like engineering and coding, because like everything moves so quickly. There's new technologies and it's important to sort of know what's around you so that you know what to use and you know what to delegate out to and things like that. But I think learning all of the tangential fields around you too helps you understand, like, if I'm not capable of doing X, I can go to this person to do it. And it's really pretty often where you end up collaborating with people, whether you're the person that enlists it or your client is the person that enlists it, is another thing. But it's nice to know what other people are capable of doing so that you can incorporate that into your thinking about the project. I think as a designer that focuses mostly on print and doesn't do a ton of web stuff, I do web stuff for fun. And I loved learning how to do development and stuff for my own projects. But what it's been really helpful with, and why I encourage designers that don't plan to do development as a part of their career, why I still encourage them to learn development, is because, for one thing, you can call bullshit on people when they say that something's not possible. You say, absolutely, that's possible. If you personally are not capable of doing that, that's one thing. But I know that this is physically possible. So you can call people out when they are being lazy or are like, instead of saying that's not in my skill set, they're saying that's not a physical possibility.
Right.
And the other thing is it really expands your mind about what you can do when it comes to designing, because it either sets a limit because you can say, okay, well, I really would love it if every headline on this page was custom, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But this is a scaling site and there's going to be weekly articles and we don't have the budget to hire someone every single week. So this has to be a typeface. Or it could be something where you say, okay, well, I do want to have this be like a crazy animated something, and I know that this CSS animation exists, so it's not actually super crazy and it's not going to crash the website. It's not like JavaScript nonsense everywhere.
Yeah.
So maybe it actually is possible to have a little bit of like animation fun going on.
So besides your design work, you have a lot of side projects, and side projects are great for creativity, but how do you manage the overwhelm?
Well, now I'm starting to get to the point where some of my side projects that I had set up a few years ago, I need to start, sailing away to other folks to handle. Because when I had started launching a lot of side projects, they weren't always sort of like one page, one off, like, archivable projects. They were ongoing things. Like my Daily Dropcat project was an archivable project. I made 12 sets of alphabets and then could leave it up as an archive forever. And all that I have to do is make sure that WordPress people don't like dig in and hack the shit out of it. But other projects that I had set up as resources that were more, amoebic and stuff like that, like Inkerlinker, which is a resource for finding printers, the overhead now of managing that project years later has exceeded, any possibility of me making money on it. I never made any money.
Sure.
So now I'm at the point where I'm like, okay, well, I need to pass that off to someone. But side projects for me have always been a way to sort of like fill in the gaps of what I'm not doing with my client work. And so that's why most of my side projects actually don't have to do with doing lettering work, because I feel like I'm getting a lot of my like actual artwork creation like for fun out of my client work. But what I'm not getting is writing. I'm not getting web development. I'm not getting general graphic design. And so a lot of the projects that I do on the side have to do with like building community resources, doing a lot of writing, making things that are not lettering, because I'm doing that. I'm getting paid to do that. So there's no need to continue doing that for fun.
Yeah. And I know I love to speak and teach and write, and you do a lot of it. I know why I love doing it. Why do you love doing it?
Well, there's a bunch of reasons. I get really, really excited when I see the excitement in someone else, and I've been able to like contribute to them finding their way in some way or another. And I also too, I'm like empathetic to the point where it's like almost a disorder. And I feel like it's really easy for me to put myself in the place of other people and to know what it was like to be so intimidated to start something or to feel like it's impossible to move your career forward.
Right.
And I feel like everyone's older sister, where I want to be the person that shows them that it's not actually impossible. And I think that's why when it comes to like the do what you love stuff, I've been in the much more practical camp of it rather than the like, screw your day job, make you hate. I'm more of like well, you should talk to your boss and see about doing stuff that you like more at work.
Right.
And
as a first step.
a first step. And I really like giving people practical ways to move forward. And I think that's how I just am in general too. I think that's one of the reasons why I'll probably never be some like crazy startup founder of like a life-changing thing, because I'm not a person that relishes thinking about like that big of picture.
Okay.
I really like sort of thinking here and moving forward and growing like naturally out rather than starting here and figuring out how to get there. And I just use that, it's the skill that I have and insight that I have to try to help other people to do that.
Well, I don't think it's too early to tell, because there's definitely, bottoms up, then top down. So we'll see.
We'll see.
So you recently wrote a book called In Progress.
I did indeed.
Yes. So tell me, why did you decide to write this book?
Well, there were a few reasons. For one thing, Chronicle approached me and just said, hey, we think you should do a book. What kind of book do you want to do? And I said, I don't know. Like, I know I should do a book, but I don't know what kind of book that would be. And one of the things that I've talked about for a couple of years, because I've had a few other publishers approach me about doing something, is that I definitely did not want to do a monograph. Because I feel like...
What's that?
A monograph is like a book of just like an encapsulation of your work.
Oh, okay.
And I think that I just felt way too early in my career to put together a book that was like, and here's my life's work, whatever.
Sure.
I think that you do that when you've been working in a field for 20 years, or when you feel like your career is about to take a really dramatic shift into a different kind of work and you want to just, put a little package around the stuff that was this part of your life. So I was really self-conscious about putting together a book at age 30 that was that, So initially my thoughts were, okay, well, everyone seems to freak out about my sketches when they get to see them. Maybe we do a book that's kind of like a coffee table book about showing the process of sketch to finish. And as I started working with them, it turned into much more of a resource-driven book than I had initially planned. And part of that is actually has to do with the contract of working with a publisher, right? So in working with a publisher, you tell them, okay, I promise to not use this work in another book for X amount of time. And after sort of spending 4 months going through contracts and trying to all get on the same page, I was like, man, this should probably be like a bigger deal than I was initially thinking it was going to be. So that was one of the things that drove it that way. And then thinking of it like, wow, this is actually kind of a big deal that I'm putting a book out in the first place, drove me to be like, I want to make this as good and as dense and as, helpful as it can be. So it started as a 5,000 to 10,000 word, which was really just captions for the work, into a 30,000 to 40,000 word like textbook light. And I'm really, really psyched with how it turned out. And what I find to be really nice about it now is that it puts together a lot of the things that I convey in workshops and a lot of the things that I've just kind of like learned in taking type design courses and things like that, so that rather than having people have to come to California to take a workshop directly from me or feel like they need to learn from me like in my physical space, which is like only possible for so many people, I'm able to sort of take that knowledge and make it a much easier to access thing for everybody. Like you don't have to be in California to hear everything that I would tell you about how to create an early piece of lettering.
Very nice. So it's your own piece of Jessica at the convenience of wherever you are.
Yeah. The convenience of wherever Amazon Prime is.
Yes, exactly. So this is a lot of stuff, lettering for other people's books and art and then your own work. How are you balancing all of this and the speaking and the teaching with your design work?
It's a constant evolving thing. Maybe a year or two ago, I put together this like ultra schedule as a post when I was trying to like make really strict guidelines on my daily schedule, which is very against my earlier statement of like, I love it when I can just do what I want and whatever. But I have found that, one of the things that I think a lot of people struggle with when they become freelancers is that the sudden complete erosion of a schedule makes it so that it can be really difficult to get work done unless you have so much work that you can't not work. right? So I tend to be completely fine with my loosey-goosey schedule if I have so much work on my calendar that I feel like I'm almost like being crushed under the weight of it. But if I'm more reasonable about the work that I take on, and I do have gaps in my schedule, and I have, the ability to leave room in case an interesting project comes along, that kind of thing, then if I don't have a very tight schedule to go with, I end up procrastinating on things.
Sure.
And so every few months, I sort of look at what my week is like. What are the things that I'm spending too much time on? How can I take those things and make a smaller amount of time in my week to work on them? And it's really just, I do a lot of self-assessment and self-checking of like, wow, I'm spending way too much time answering emails. I need to figure out how to spend less time doing that. Oh, wow, I've said yes to way too many speaking engagements. I need to have better rules about what kind of speaking engagements I talk at. And I think that as someone that works for themselves, I rely on people coming to me to say like, here's the work that you're going to be doing in the future. But I think that it's also should be on me to say, here's the work that I want to be doing. Mm-hmm. How do I make sure that I leave room in my calendar to do that? Or if I know that I can only do 5 speaking engagements in a year now, how do I actually just reach out to people and say, I want to speak at your event, rather than waiting for that right event to come to me? And so I think it's a combination of like waiting for the right thing to come along and making sure that you're still being active and trying to line yourself up for success.
So any final thoughts that you'd like to share with our viewers out there today?
I think really I've said it a couple of times of it's just really important to spend time thinking about what you want to do and what's important to you. And I think that other people out there are really good about offering advice all the time. You can't spit and not hit someone that's trying to tell you like the ideal way to run your business or the ideal way to do whatever. But just know that like people get really excited to share their own success stories and things that have worked for them. And that might work for you or it might not work for you. And you have to sort of know what kind of person that you are and know what's going to make you happy, rather than following prescriptive methods of what has made other people happy. And I think that the people that have the best careers and the people that are the happiest in their careers are people that have created careers around them based on their needs and based on who they are and what they want to do, rather than people that have fallen into line and gone into a career that seemed like a pre-carved path.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. I know I certainly fit into that latter camp of design your own career and design your own path. So,
and what's interesting is that it seems like the scariest path to take, because there is no track record of success, because you've invented your job. But in the end, because you're more malleable than people that get into a more traditional, ladder climbing kind of situation, the rug doesn't get pulled out from underneath you quite as easily. Mm-hmm. And I think that diversifying the way that things come in, we didn't talk about this very much, but I think that's incredibly important. It's something that as an engineer, within the web world is very easy to do, because you can work on big projects, but you can also work on little teeny projects. And I think that having the mix of those things is what really makes it so that you can have, you don't have to worry if your one client goes out of business because you have other things going on.
Yeah, you've got that diversification. Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for talking to us today, Jessica.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, this was wonderful. Great. Thank you. And thanks to all you viewers for tuning in today. And special thanks to our sponsor, Pivotal Tracker, for their help in producing this episode of FemgineerTV. If you've enjoyed this episode, then please share it with your friends, your teammates, and your boss. And subscribe to our YouTube channel to receive the next episode. I'll catch you next time. This episode of FemgineerTV is brought to you by Pivotal Tracker. Build better software faster. Welcome to the 17th episode of FemgineerTV, brought to you... I'm here with Jessica Hische, who is a letterer. Jessica has worked for a prominent designer like Luis...
I'm a little giggly right now.
Yeah, it's okay, it's good.